All right, so Tyler, we talked about this year and the playoff system changing this year feels tailor-made for Notre Dame, almost as if their athletic director was in the room when it was created. But now there's talk about they're going to change things starting in 2026. Automatic bids, and the number we've heard. So like Ross Dellinger at Yahoo put the story out where he was talking about 14-team playoff. 14 seems to be the number that everybody's talked about after that meeting last week. Not 16, even though 16 was thrown out there, but 14. And then you could have as many as 4 auto bids for the SEC, 4 for the Big Ten, and then 2 each for the ACC and Big 12, and then 1 for the highest ranked group of 5. I'm bad at math. This is a bad at math show. That sounds like 13 of 14 spots.
That's a lot. Yeah. I was just in my head going, okay. I mean, once you said Big Ten and SEC at 4 each, that's already over half the field right there. There's only 6 left. And then obviously there's 2 other power conferences or whatever we're calling those these days. Yeah. We're talking about seats at the table. I think that's the cliche that a lot of people like to use. Notre Dame is literally watching these chairs get filled up while it's just sitting there. And that's when this gets scary, because right now, like you said, Andy, this is tailor-made. This is set up perfectly. 7 at-large spots. I mean, if you look at going back to when Brian Kelly was rolling with this program, winning 10 games every single year, 5 years in a row, you look at where Notre Dame finished in the polls those years, they're going to make a 12-team playoff. And even last year when Notre Dame went 9-3, they got close. Like, it was close. And that's why I think at the beginning of this conversation, Andy, you were saying 10-2, that gets you in. Like, you're in. And I'm saying 11-1, you're obviously in at that point. But as soon as you go to 14 teams and the SEC is taking up over a third of, or around a third of those in the Big Ten, and then that's over half, that gets scary for Notre Dame, because
you'd have to be 11-1 or 12-0. Yeah, that if there's only one at large, and even 11-1 might not get it for you, probably would. But that's the thing. Like, if now, I still think that this is a beginning of a negotiation type situation where they throw that out, they're okay with less than that. So even if you went to 3 for the SEC, 3 for the Big Ten, 1 each for the ACC and Big 12, 1 for the highest rank, then you have 5 at larges. Notre Dame's probably cool with that. But anything that forces Notre Dame toward a conference, I think, is problematic for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've been dealing with for the last 2 years, right? For the entire time that I've been here, this will be my 4th year covering Notre Dame football. And it seems like for 2 or 3 of those, all we've been talking about every single offseason, except for when Stephen A. Smith goes on a little rant about relevance, is should Notre Dame join a conference or not? And it's funny. It's literally become a tug of war, Andy, because if you have no dog in this fight and you're not a Notre Dame fan and you are completely on the outside, you're screaming, why aren't you joining a conference? Just get in. That's kind of where that Stephen A. Smith rant started, because I think the beginning of the conversation, they were talking about, okay, how does this changed playoff, which really isn't a changed playoff, affect Notre Dame? And then they started talking about relevance. But that has been the dominating offseason storyline every single year for probably the last 3 years, is should Notre Dame join a conference? And look, they just re-upped with NBC and got all the money. Jack Swarbrick talks about his tenets of what needs to happen for Notre Dame to remain independent. It's money and access to a college football playoff. Those are the 2 big ones. The third one is, do we have a TV home for our non-revenue sports? So like the Olympic sports. I was watching Notre Dame lacrosse yesterday on ESPNU. So that right now, that box is getting filled as well. All 3 are getting filled. So as it stands right now, Notre Dame is happy not to join a conference. But as soon as you start taking up those chairs at the college football playoff table, that changes things, because Notre Dame wants to win a national championship. And if the path and the access is not there, they will make sure they make the necessary changes to arrive at a place where they can get into the college football playoff rather easily.
And that format is supposed to be approved within the next month, because they need to do it for TV purposes and planning purposes. But we'll see, because obviously there's still more realignment potentially in the air. So Pete Pavakwa, the successor to Jack Swarbrick, who's retiring this year, may have to do some stuff too. But let's talk about the Stephen A. Smith thing, because the relevance discussion for Notre Dame is always hilarious to me. Like, was Michigan irrelevant before they won the national title last year? No, they were very relevant in the sport of college football. always a relevant conversation. My favorite part of any Notre Dame thing is when I put out a Notre Dame story or we have a Notre Dame segment on the show, people are like, I don't care about Notre Dame. Like, yeah, you do, because you just told me you did.
Yeah, why'd
like,
you say it?
Yeah, when we do that same segment, and it's even if it's a school like Penn State, which is a big deal, you don't have people, I don't care about Penn State. They don't do that. They just ignore it. But Notre Dame makes people feel a certain kind of way, one way or the other.
Yeah, and Stephen A. Smith knew what he was doing. Stephen A. Smith has known what he's been doing for a long time. Like, he's a smart dude. And then, Andy, people started trying to tell me that Stephen A. Smith is not relevant. And I was like, no. I put it in my
very
column.
Highly relevant. Yeah.
He's very highly relevant, and he knows that. So that you're talking about two very relevant things. And that's why it got as much play as it did. So, I mean, I was not surprised that he said it. I was not surprised at the backlash. And then some people, the people that were rushing to agree with Stephen A. Smith, just proved my point even further, because, and what you were just saying even further, Andy, because if Notre Dame's not relevant, you're not going to be talking about them. And everyone started talking about them with that little rant. So Notre Dame is relevant. And we were talking about this off air as well. Have the Dallas Cowboys not been relevant for the last 30 years just because they haven't won a Super Bowl since January of 1996?
And this is where Stephen A. Stephen A. has built a career trolling the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, there's obviously more to him than that. But perhaps my favorite thing he does is troll the Dallas Cowboys and their fans. And it is like that. Their show, if it doesn't have a Cowboys segment in it, that's probably less than 10% of their shows. So, like, he gets it. And Notre Dame, you made this comparison in your column, very much the Dallas Cowboys of college football. Everyone has an opinion on them, and usually they hate them, but they feel about them very strongly, as opposed to other teams where you just don't feel that strongly.
And that's why I'm actually a Cowboys fan, born and raised in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so I can connect and sympathize.
Front runner. You were growing up when they were winning Super Bowls.
No, the last time that they won a Super Bowl, I was 3 or 4 months old. I was born in 1995. So
good God, I'm old.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry about that. I am literally like the living embodiment of whenever I'm having this conversation, I can almost say that the Dallas Cowboys have not won a Super Bowl in my lifetime. I can say that Notre Dame has never won a national championship in my lifetime. And I think that, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong here, if I were to say that Notre Dame is America's team because you either love them or hate them, I honestly grew up indifferent when I was in Texas. Like, I saw Notre Dame and I was like, that's Notre Dame. That's cool. That's college football. I like, and this is, think of the mid thousands. I mean, we're talking Charlie Weiss, and I was still like, Notre Dame is Notre Dame. And I'm 1,000 miles away in Texas, and I still felt that. So you either love them or you hate them, or you're weird like me and you kind of grew up in the middle of that. But like, as great as Alabama has been for the last 15 years, Andy, would you say that Alabama is America's team? Or
no? I do think people hate them in the Darth Vader way. Team, right? Yeah. I will say, so when I was a kid in the 80s, the hatred for Notre Dame was fairly similar to the hatred for Alabama in the Saban era.
So good, yeah.
Yeah. Now, there's more grudging respect for the Saban Alabama teams. Like, people just hated Notre Dame. But with the Notre Dame hatred back when I was a kid, it was very different. It was because Notre Dame was always on TV, and your team might not always be on TV. Like, people who are your age or younger do not understand what it's like to not be able to watch your team on television every week. Yeah. And so, like, there's an old, if you want to laugh, there's an old Clemson recruiting video from like 1981 that's on YouTube. And they talk about how many times Clemson's been on national television in the previous 2 seasons.
Wow.
Like, it's insane. But Notre Dame was always, like, every Notre Dame home game was on NBC. Every Notre Dame game got rebroadcast on Sunday mornings. Pretty much everywhere in the country was syndicated. And so you really hated Notre Dame because you're like, well, how come my team didn't get that treatment? But now it's not the same.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm talking about when growing up in the mid-thousands. It's like, Yeah, Notre Dame's on TV, but at that point, everyone else kind of started to be on TV as well. So,
Yeah.
but that's relevance, though, Andy, and then that's like the foundation of relevance. Getting back to this, what started this conversation. Why is Notre Dame relevant in 2024 without having won a national championship in 36 years? It's because they were the team that was on TV every single week, and Notre Dame was college football. Here's a Nebraska fan popping in. I would go as far as to say Nebraska is still relevant. Obviously, we still talk about
Absolutely.
Nebraska. How many times have you talked about Nebraska on this show, Andy? And they haven't done
Tons.
squat in exactly. That's relevant,
Right? Because
and that was
every time I talk about Nebraska, lots of people watch it.
Yeah, and we haven't been talking about Nebraska this entire time, but a Nebraska fan just popped in and wanted to say something. So that's relevance, and that was the headline of my article. Even was don't confuse success with relevance because they're two entirely different things. And Nebraska is an even greater example of that because Notre Dame has actually still been successful in the last 5 to 10 years. Definitely the last 5 years.
Yeah, they made the 14 playoff like
twice.
How many programs would kill to have done that?
Yeah, there's only 8 that have made multiple college football playoffs, Andy, and there's only 6 since the college football playoffs started in 2014. Only 6 teams have won the national championship. So if you're telling, and there's the 6th right there, if you're telling me that only half a dozen teams out of 130 plus in the FBS can be relevant, then I don't know why I'm on this show at 9 a.m. talking about college football because that's just 6 fan bases that should care about this stuff, but it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, because I see a full Notre Dame stadium every week. I see 100,000 plus at Tennessee every week. I see all these places that are quote unquote irrelevant. It seems like they're pretty important to some people. So exactly. Well, Tyler, thank you so much. I'm with you on Notre Dame's schedule. I'm very excited to see what they look like in the Mike Denbrock, Riley Leonard era of offense. And 9.5. Good number.
Yeah, man. Just get through that first one, and I think they're going over 9.5. You lose that first one, and then you're just talking about doubt the entire year. So that's a huge one, and that's what makes college football so awesome. Like we get to start with that, and it's a barometer for both sides because you talk to Mike Elko this entire time. I am so interested and intrigued from his perspective because I can literally visualize both things, Andy, at the end of that game. You're either talking Mike Elko has arrived and he's at Texas A&M and he doesn't need a rebuilding year or whatever. They're going for it now. Or if they lose that game, everyone's just going to be saying, hey, give them time. It's going to be okay. Like it's going to be one of those two things. And that's going to be awesome because you get to talk about that all week, no matter which one it is.
The other great thing about college football is we get to massively overreact to things. And that is a game that no matter what happens, we will massively overreact. And I cannot wait. Tyler, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.